I'm Andre Huey and welcome to 2020 In Retrospect. This is a special program of SKN Newsline and Voice of the Caribbean Radio. So glad you could join us. On this program, we'll be reviewing the year 2020 and we'll be speaking to our media colleagues in St. Kitts and Nevis as we look at the big headlines in news in St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider Caribbean as well as the world. Of course, COVID-19 would have dominated the news in 2020, so we'll be looking at that extensively. And we'll also be taking a look at politics. Our panel comprises Jermaine Abel, reporter with SKN Vibes, Mr. Glenn Bart, reporter with SKN Newsline, our sister media entity, and Alicia Daniel Blake, news editor at Sugar City 90.3 FM in St. Kitts. We first start with Mr. Bart from SKN Newsline.
I think the whole aspect of collaboration and cooperation during the pandemic was one of the major features that allowed St. Kitts and Nevis to limit the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, with most of all of the cases being imported, very strong and robust quarantining measures and contact tracing. So I think from the business angle is where I'm very much impressed as well, in that people are trying to rebound. They're looking at collaborative efforts. They're trying to use virtual reality platforms to push their businesses. It's going to be a long process, but I think we're going to see some innovations along the way.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for that. Well, let's start with, on that note, how would each of you think that COVID-19 has impacted St. Kitts and Nevis, and what good, if any, has come out of it? Alicia, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, I agree with Mr. Bart in terms of we've seen many of us, of those persons who I would prefer to do something face-to-face than to use technology, for example, to pay a bill and things like that. I am now forced during the lockdown to do such things, because we also realize that, for example, if you needed to pay your electricity bill, the lines were so long that it made more sense to just do it online. So certain things have been forced upon us, and it's actually a positive thing in terms of being able to be as versatile as possible. And actually, some of us may never go back to doing things, having to stand in those long lines and so forth. And we also see another positive thing for me would be a return to hygiene. I recall on many occasions, hearing persons say, for instance, oh, my coworker does not wash their hands after using the bathroom, etc. Now, again, we have no choice. Not only do we have to be more cleanly, there's a push for cleanliness, but we also need to sanitize when we enter an establishment and so forth. And the environment has been very happy, because we realize from the news agencies that they actually had before and after pictures when there were lockdowns, and we realized that the environment actually improved a bit. So that's another positive thing. We also saw persons being more kind in general. I don't know how long this will last, but we have seen, because there was, for example, persons entering supermarkets, and we would give the older ones or the persons who are differently abled the opportunity to enter such establishments first, as well, of course, the workers who we really come to appreciate now more, the essential workers. We see that persons have actually, maybe at first unwillingly, but after a while, I realized that persons normally now give preference to such individuals. Is this something that is going to continue? It's definitely a positive thing for me.
What about you, Jermaine? How have you seen the transformation of this Kisnevis society as a result of COVID-19?
Well, I mean, just to piggyback on several points that Alicia made, COVID-19 has brought a lot of changes to our lives, good and bad. I mean, she spoke about technology. Literally, a lot of people, including I wouldn't say all, but those in the mature class in society, has actually been able to transition away from the dislike of technology to the use of technology, whether it be paying bills, communicating with family, or just in general, things that we never knew that we could have done before, we actually learned during the latter parts of 2020. You know, I mean, I personally hate lines, and I would trust into actually you paying bills online and using technology more. Additionally, COVID-19 has taught all of us, the young, the old, the mature, to be more patient. Amazingly, a lot of people learned significant patience during 2020. I mean, when you look at the lines that you saw at the supermarket, people getting up at 4, being in line from 5, and you're not getting into the supermarket until about 12, 1, 2 in the afternoon. That shows that we can literally do more in terms of being patient and the way in which we solve situations. Mental toughness, that is something that was significant during 2020. We all been home for a significant amount of time, and that really it took a toll on a lot of people. I mean, the statistics might not be out there to give true justice to the picture in terms of how the whole lockdowns and the COVID-19 affected us mentally. But looking at it from a larger perspective, people grew mental toughness during 2020, all because of the COVID-19 and the lockdowns. It also, 2020 and COVID-19 showed us that how we can prioritize our needs against our wants. You know, the lockdowns meant that a lot of us did not get to go out party. A lot of us saved money. A lot of people were able to make $1 into $5 and make us know that, hey, look, if this is the last thing we have in our cupboard, it has to last until the lockdown ends. So all of that was part of what the learning curve is for us. Hygiene, as Alicia would have mentioned, a lot of people, I mean, sad to say, and Alicia brought on the point, people use the washrooms, they don't wash their hands, and we know it in terms of a lot of the visitors who come to the island. I'm not, trying to single anybody out, but when you hear things like that is happening in your country, and now the government has to reinforce the point that, hey, look, personal hygiene is key. That is something that should have been the top, as you treating your as your children grow, you teach them, you know, make your bed, wash your hands, brush your teeth. But when you have the government reinforcing these things, it was a matter of concern for me, you know. Additionally, you have people, one of the things that amazed me, right, is we keep hearing about crime and all of these problems and people not adhering to what the government is saying. But when you see the lockdown scheme, that showed that people have respect and should continue that level of respect towards both the government and law enforcement agencies, because nobody could have left their house. Nobody would have believed that the 1st of January 2020, that you would not have been able to leave your house for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 6 months. Nobody would believe that this would have led to a significant reduction in crime. If you had told somebody that at the 1st of January 2020, that between the 30th of March and maybe the end of August, we would have seen a significant reduction in certain issues because of COVID-19 or because of the lockdown, people would tell you, no, I would be out partying. A lot of us had significant plans for 2020, but then look what happened. And then all of it was a good. But one issue that came out of that was the fact that, well, two issues that I can think of offhand. One is the significant increase in instances or cases of domestic violence. That's one of the negative issues that raised a broad picture or a broad issue that hasn't been addressed,
And,
whether
and
it be
I,
in St. Kitts and Nevis or throughout the world.
and throughout the world. And I agree with you on that. And I think that is something that, as journalists, we would probably have to look at covering more in 2021, because, in my opinion, I don't think it was reported enough for various reasons, of course. But yeah,
Well,
very good points, though,
we
Johnny.
did some, but the last point I was going to make on the issue or the negative issue of COVID-19 is the issue surrounding schools and children. A lot of children, and we heard it from the permanent secretary last year. I think that was maybe coming on to the last quarter or thereabout. He said a lot of students, even though they were working from home, you had this issue of not many of them either not being online or present for the virtual sessions, or they did not submit their work for whether it be grading or review. And that for me was a significant concern that needs to be addressed, because COVID-19 is still here. This is 2020. We have a new strain. Possibility exists that maybe we can go into a second significant lockdown as we would have seen in 2020. And how do we get parents to get the children to understand, or get parents to ensure that kids attend the virtual sessions and have them be present at all?
I think that the use of online learning facilities for the schools, for the children, for teachers, I think that has long-term benefits, not only in terms of administration, but in terms of students being able to pursue certain kinds of projects that perhaps they would not have ventured into if they were in the normal phase of operation for schools. So that is one area. We also saw, and we are still seeing, because of the pandemic, the use of technology for funerals, for weddings. I can tell you that one of my nephews got married. We were able to view the whole thing online. That's how we participated. We couldn't travel. So yes, there are new ways of doing things. And we should not drop the ball on this, but rather to pick it up and look for opportunities to make it better, make the experience better, even in education for children, and for doing business, for recreation and that kind of thing.
Yeah, indeed. I agree. I think in that sense, there are some good things that would have come out of the pandemic itself in terms of what. Now, in terms of, and I think Glenn made reference to it earlier, the business community and how they have rallied behind. Yes, there has been a negative impact on the economy, but businesses have found creative ways to earn a dollar, so to speak. And that I found quite interesting. Alicia, I don't know if you want to speak to that in terms of the economic impact and how businesses here have somewhat sort of been resilient in dealing with the crisis itself.
Yes, I agree. Initially, the first thing persons would tend to look at is the negative. They would say, okay, well, many persons lost jobs. Many persons would have been basically at home, but this, in a sense, brought out the creativity. There have been, for instance, establishments that would have revamped their work schedules and would have been able to have workers come in shifts in order so that there would not be too many persons in the establishment abiding by the COVID-19 spacing protocols. And so we see that, in a sense, began the creativity for those businesses that had larger bases for their employees. So they had larger employee larger number of employees, then we would see that they would have organized the shift system for their employees. And in terms of entrepreneurship, that was even more use of ingenuity. Some of those persons who would have become unemployed, for example, those in the tourism industry, would have had to find creative ways to make a living, because even though there would have been the stimulus package in terms of government and in terms of social security, in the meantime, persons would have had to make a living. And so we found a lot of creativity in terms of new businesses. I saw quite a few delivery services popping up in terms of, you would see supermarkets offering curb pickup. You'd have also in terms of people going shopping for other persons. So that was something that was a stimulus in terms of encouraging persons to think of ways of earning their living. Even establishments offered delivery services that didn't normally do so previously. So yes, that is another positive.
Yeah, indeed. Well, even as we look at it as well, we also have to look at the state that we're in right now. We have a situation where the borders have reopened, but the way tourists can interact with people in the community has changed a lot. In fact, a number of even the COVID cases that have been reported of late for St. Kitts and Nevis, they've all been in quarantine. Just speak to the impact, and maybe Glenn will get you here to speak to the impact of the tourism sector in terms of how tourism is even conducted as a result of COVID-19, in light of the fact that we have to ensure that persons coming in to the country, or those who are allowed to interact with persons, are negative, they are not COVID positive.
First of all, with the reopening of the borders, we have begun to see the return of many nationals who must go into quarantine, of course. But there are also a small but growing number of individuals who are coming for vacation. There is a fact out there that people are still willing to travel within the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is important for us to protect ourselves in that kind of scenario. One of the interesting things that have developed is regards to the taxi driver operations. You know that they've had to install barriers within their vehicles to keep themselves separated from their passengers. They've had to sanitize frequently, not only the individual passengers and themselves, but also the vehicle that that they're using. So their cost has gone up, and I know in recent times they have been requesting an increase in fares, and that's an issue that has not been resolved as yet and is still under negotiations. We have seen, as I indicated earlier, that a number of businesses have collaborated with each other. For example, we have a batik operation collaborating with water sports operation, as well as with an agricultural production, and creating a special kind of tour for persons who are willing to explore St. Kitts and Nevis within the lockdown. And we also saw a greater dependence on local persons supporting the tourism operations. I can give, for example, Wally Beach Resort that ran a number of special packages for local persons who wanted to stay for a weekend. They were able to go have a good time, enjoy themselves, great food, enjoy the beaches and so forth. So we are seeing a kind of interdependence being created among business operations. And I think the idea of isolating ourselves, an isolated business operation, is going to be a thing of the past. And we're going to see a lot more collaboration going forward.
Indeed. All right, well, thank you for that, Glenn. Well, COVID-19 certainly dominated most of the news for 2020, and everything I think has surrounded the pandemic. Later on in the show, we're going to take some time to look how we can manage going forward and what would actually be put in place going forward. But I also want to take a quick look, maybe for 5 minutes, on the rest of the region, because we're seeing a lot of things happening with the COVID-19 pandemic as it relates to even countries that's very close to us, such as Antigua and Barbuda and St. Martin. And St. Martin in particular have had quite a number of deaths from their cases. But Jeremy, maybe you could look at the regional impact. We've been hearing news coming out of Trinidad and Tobago that there's an outbreak in a hospital there. We've heard reports out of Jamaica that the new strain that everyone was talking about from the UK, there is a case of a new strain in Jamaica. I mean, regionally, how do you think this impacts, how will the countries deal with that? And eventually, how are we going to interact with countries in the region that have increased cases?
I have a saying. We did not, from a regional perspective, did not treat the virus with any major, we didn't look at it from, our leaders rather, did not look at the virus from as being anything major, right? And for me, that's where the problem started. Our regional leaders had a meeting back in February last year. The virus was beginning to make a move last year, just as the CARICOM's intersectional meeting was being held. I think that was in Barbados. Now, we were covering this since January, the start of January. February came, and then March, then we kept hearing, even on local scene, we kept hearing mixed messages. Jamaica had the first case of the coronavirus. That was probably in March. Then Guyana, Trinidad, and all the others. But our leaders did not create a holistic plan to actually combat and how we as a region should go forward in terms of dealing with the coronavirus. Fast forward now to 8-9 months later, we still don't have a single plan in terms of how each territory should focus on dealing with the coronavirus, how we should open our borders, how we should treat flights coming from the UK, how should we treat flights coming from US, Canada. We all are dependent on tourism, but we still don't have a single plan that says Antigua as being the hub for the UK flights for St. Kitts and Nevis. This is how you should treat this. Now, this is being, as we're seeing now with Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados, St. Vincent, Grenada, the cluster of cases. This is just highlighting the lack of a cohesive approach to combating the problem. Now, Trinidad opened its borders early, and then we saw significant community spread. Guyana didn't shut down its borders initially. Look what happened. That territory has just about over 1,000 active cases right now. Look at Barbados. Significant spread because of one tourist who decided, hey, look, I'm not going to stay in quarantine, I'm going to go shopping. Look what happened now. Their measures down there are not as strict as what you may find here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Then you saw a bus crawl that caused a cluster of 150 plus, 160 plus cases. Then in Grenada, we saw what happened there, a cluster of 26 cases. Then look what's happening in Jamaica. So the problem is broader than individual territories, because Mr. Abel may wake up tomorrow and say, hey, look, I am going to Jamaica for vacation. But then he travels to Jamaica, he maybe catches the virus over there, he brings it back, maybe it's a new strain of the virus, and he may accidentally pass it on to someone. But how do we deal with this holistically, because we have regional integration, we have people moving. Even though the vaccine is here, we still don't have a single way in which we are dealing with the virus, and that problem is being reflected in the way the cases are popping up in the individual territories.
Yeah, okay, my audio was down a bit. Yes, so I was just saying, I was just agreeing with you that yes, it is indeed a challenge for the region and how they're going to deal with this issue. And everyone, as you said, is dealing with it differently. There's no cohesion in terms of a policy, a unified policy. And this was something that was called for from the very beginning when the pandemic was taking its toll across the world, that the region needed to come. And there were attempts to do that, but as everything with the Caribbean, we start together and we end up apart. Yes, indeed. All right, I want to shift gears. Well, okay, yes, go ahead.
There's one other thing that we should mention that really impacted 2020 within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was the issue. That, of course, we know was losing money for many years, and I think COVID-19 was just the tipping scale that threw it to the dustbin. But it also brought into focus with all the arguments that were going back and forth between Barbados and Antigua and one of the other shareholders, how important it is to have a regional air carrier to serve as impetus for this, what we perceive to be an integration movement that is so important to us. And I don't believe that we had a real good answer to that. And it left to be seen going forward as Leah tries to make a return to the skies, how much our governments in the Caribbean, in the Eastern Caribbean, are going to either invest or support or in some way find a way to make a regional carrier practical and workable. And it's going to be a difficult road, but I think that is something that we're going to have to address sooner rather than later.
Agreed, indeed. Liat is always an ongoing story, and definitely that is something to look for in 2021. I want to shift gears a bit to talk about politics, because that certainly was a major thing for 2020. There were a number of elections across the region. We had elections here in St. Kitts Nevis, we had elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica. All incumbents have won. Each of you, I just want you to tell me quickly what were the standout points for you. Obviously, Team Unity retained power by a larger margin. There were allegations of electoral irregularities, none of which were brought to the court necessarily because, as we know, the opposition withdrew those claims, but withdrew the petition. But in terms of the major thing that stood out for you, St. Kitts Nevis wise, locally in politics, what would you say? Alicia, I'll start with you.
Okay. In terms of politics, I really liked the way technology seemed to come to the forefront once again in terms of campaigning. To me, in a sense, that reduced some of the nastiness that is known in Caribbean politics in general, because they more had to follow a format abiding by the COVID-19 protocols. It mostly took place online. And then when there were motorcades, it would be, they're in their own vehicles, etc. So less of the nastiness of the politics that we normally see took place. Of course, there was the usual harsh words, and name calling and soiling of reputations as usual, because that can be transmitted via the type of communication that we have. But in terms of some of the actually more in-your-face type of aggressiveness, that was reduced a bit. And of course, on polling day, we saw again the difference in terms of the way in which residents had to line up, the wearing of masks, the sanitizing, and so forth. that also, of course, was different.
Jermaine, what about you? How was the election for you in terms of what were some of the things that stood out for you?
Just a point of correction, Andre. Not all incumbents won this year.
Well, in the Caribbean,
Just a thing to
in the
know.
Caribbean, in the
Oh, in
Caribbean,
the Caribbean.
the US is a separate
Caribbean.
thing.
No, in the Caribbean. Guyana, the
Oh
incumbent
right,
lost.
yes. How could I forget? But that
Yes.
one wasn't impacted by
Yeah.
COVID. All the COVID elections,
If you want to put
the
it that way.
incumbents won.
But yes, the elections this year, it was significant. It highlighted the fact that changes can be made to the point where, as Alicia rightly said, it can be all parties can be campaign on an even footing, a level playing field. All campaigns can be done not in person, but more technology. It can be more innovative, and they can reach the people more. And I don't want to say a lot of money cannot be spent, but a lot of what we people describe as waste of money can be minimized in terms of all the big campaigning and throwing money behind those what some people again describe as insignificant things towards getting the people to come out and vote, and more that money can actually go towards assisting people. But it also highlighted the fact that you don't need to have this big partying atmosphere to get your message across. People, it's just the simple things of telling me what you are going to do for me if I vote for you, or why should I vote for you, and how, if I vote for you, will benefit me and the country in the long run. And this was seen throughout the Caribbean. I mean, in Trinidad, they took a page from St. Kitts. In St. Vincent, they did a similar thing. So it just highlighted that changes can be made, you know, in terms of dealing with elections and move away from this big Bura and all of that. You know, it's simple things. And I think 2020 has highlighted that this is what can be done going forward in order to meet the people. I mean, let's take a page from US elections. One time Donald Trump went to one of the states to campaign in freezing snow, and it took people, what, 3-4 hours after he left to actually get to the vehicles because of the traffic jam and stuff like that. Looking at Biden on the opposite side, his campaign held most of their meetings virtually, a few in-person meetings where a few people came out, drove in and stuff like that. But majority of the people use technology, whether it be the mainstream media, social media platforms, to actually listen to the message. And we've seen it. We've seen the benefits of it. Small cases that would not minimizing the cluster cases and stuff like that. So all in all, in some quarters it was fair, in others people described it as not being fair. But all in all, we saw successful elections throughout the Caribbean.
Indeed, and one of the things that I also took note of was that most of the elections, or most of the incumbents that would have won, and you did point out to me that in the case of Guyana, that wasn't the case, but there seems to be something about crises. A crisis just tends to mobilize people to put confidence back into what they already know, as opposed to putting the unknown. And I think that was the case in Trinidad. That was definitely the case in Jamaica, even though there was a low voter turnout. Would you say that that was the case here, though, Glenn?
Low voter turnout? No, I don't think so.
But in terms of the public saying, well, we are putting our confidence back in the government.
Yeah, well, I believe crisis such as a pandemic or any kind of natural disaster kind of situation tends to favor an incumbent administration. And we saw that here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we saw it in some of the other islands as well. But one of the things that that was stood out to me really was the situation with electoral observers. We remember in St. Kitts at almost at the last moment, the OAS observers were denied participation, even though they said they were ready and willing to travel. But that was not a situation that was limited to St. Kitts alone. We saw the same situation play out in Trinidad and Tobago's elections. And in both instances, opposition parties accused the government of using COVID-19 as a excuse for essentially trying to hijack the outcome of the elections. Whether or not that is true remains unanswered. But I believe that in the end, I believe that the elections in general throughout the Caribbean, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, were in pretty much fair, and all of the observers, the local observers, also came to that conclusion that the elections were held free and fair. However, it doesn't negate the fact that opposition parties believe that the government, the incumbent administration, used the protocols of COVID-19 as a means of getting an advantage over the opposition parties, and that is something that perhaps in the next elections, even in the absence of a disaster situation, how do all parties in an election gather and gain access to the media, the official media, government media, and can they make their points, make their presentations to the wider population? That is something that we have to look out for.
One of the things, though, and I'd love to get your input from each of you on this one, which was a bit surprising to me, was the decision by the opposition to withdraw their petition, citing, of course, that there was a technicality. But many other observers and experts and pundits would have said that it would have been difficult for them to prove what they were alleging. What are your thoughts on that? Because for me, that was unusual. It wasn't something that I was quite accustomed to. Jermaine?
Just to make a point before we go back, before I respond to your question, Andre, to the point Bart was making, for me to conclude what he was saying is the big topic that is on everybody's mind, and it's not only here in St. Kitts and Nevis but throughout the Caribbean, the issue of fixed elections date. That to me would solve a lot of the issues and gripes that we would have seen develop here in St. Kitts and Nevis, raised here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Because if you know you have elections slated for the 25th of December 2021 and you have a pandemic, it means that from today, the 5th of January, you have to begin planning to work towards having a free, fair, and safe elections on December 25th, right? But that's something that's been talked about, and it has not come to fruition just yet. But hopefully, the governments throughout the region can see the benefits of having a fixed election date for elections, whether it be local or federal elections here in St. Kitts and Nevis, or just general elections across the region. That's one way of dealing with the problem, and that can also be addressed using the no confidence motion, because somebody asked that sometime back, how would you give it no confidence motions if it is successfully passed? You just give it a fixed time frame that it can be heard and the government has to be dissolved. But going back to your question, sorry, I forgot the question.
I was asking if the election petitions that were filed by the opposition that were eventually withdrawn. For me, that was an unusual situation. But what were your thoughts on that, and what do you think is the next step going forward as it relates to the opposition party?
To be honest, from what I've been hearing, in terms of what they purported to be evidence, it would have been interesting to hear both sides argue in that case, in those petition cases. It's a difficult thing to actually put a full stop or an exclamation mark on this case, because it goes to the point that you do, I do, why is it wrong? You did this before, I did this now, why is it wrong? But the bottom line is still wrong. It's just who's deciding to bring the matter to the court. But it was difficult from my understanding of the whole complexity of the case and the petition matters. The bottom line is, though, we still don't know what the technicality was. That has not been explained, or nobody has said what the technicality was that actually led to the petitions being withdrawn. But if from what I've been hearing is true, it would have, even if the cases had gone forward, the cases would have been thrown out eventually. But it highlighted, or it makes the opposition look bad right now, to the point that if you had all of this evidence, then why the petitions were withdrawn? You came, you said you had all the facts to present. This matter should have gone forward. But again, it's a difficult one, and I think if they want to go forward right now, they have to make changes ahead of the 2025, 2024, 2025 election.
Alicia, what about you?
Well, we are looking at the matters in terms of the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party, but there was also another legal matter that went forward, and that was the one pertaining to the former minister, Ian Patches Liburd, and Dr. Jeffrey Hanley. And the Mr. Liburd did go forward with it. There was a recount, and then it was at that point that he withdrew. So that is another matter that we don't have closure, in a sense, on, in the sense that we never did get the results of the recount. But we see that both sides did seek legal recourse, and we are still left wondering what happened. But in one instance, we see that the Labour Party did cause the Team Unity administration again to withdraw in the sense with ZIZ, because we understood that there was the petition being put forward in terms of getting more airtime on the local programming, ZIZ, ZIZ, and we saw that as a result of that, shortly after that, we heard about this case being petitioned for, that the ZIZ board put out a statement saying that the St. Kitts and Nevis Labour Party was then allowed airtime. So I think that was actually something that we could also look at, because we saw the end result of that one, and that is that up to on the weekend, or well, following that, we saw that the different New Year's messages from the different political leaders were aired, in the sense that stories were written on each of them. We had stories written on the Prime Minister's New Year's Day address. We had stories written on Dr. Douglas's New Year's Day address. So is that something that shows our society is becoming more progressive in terms of politics?
But if we can slip back a little bit to the issue of the reason for the withdrawal of the challenge with regards to corruption and 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 irregularities within the elections. Um, I believe that I spoke with Dr. Denzel Douglas on this matter, and he did indicate to me that there was an unforeseen cost that was involved, which was to be paid at a certain point in time, and apparently that was not paid. And as a result, the process could not go forward. That was an explanation that he gave to me. But apart from that, though, when you look at what happened after the elections, um, it showed to me that we need to have addressed this issue of how long petitions take to be resolved. I think we need to look at the system. We need to revamp it so that if there's any challenge, it can be quickly addressed, be resolved, and we don't have this weeks and months of wrangling in courts and that kind of thing. And in addition to that, we still have the situation where counting of ballots on the election night is taking way too long. For a small island like St. Kitts and Nevis, I can't see why the results of a constituency will take almost half a day to get to be completed. So I think there are problems that we need to address, and we need to address them sooner rather than later, because this thing is really getting out of hand. It's every election it gets worse. So I think we need to address this thing at the moment.
Jeremy, I see your position as if you want to say something, so I'm gonna give you the mic briefly because we're almost out of time.
Well, it's on the issue of voting. I think we need to come to the issue that have to upgrade. Brad was making the point, the length of time it takes to actually count. Before, during, and after elections. Those three, for me, is key in terms of dealing with elections, because we don't have, up to this point, code of conduct. There may be one that is outspoken, but there's none that the parties sign on to, or if they do, it's not made public like that. But the point is, you want free, fair playing field before elections, where at the end of it, Jeremy cannot say Bart had more free time than him, or Bart say Jeremy had more social media presence than him, or he was on one station more than the other. That sort of code of conduct is what is said in terms of before. During, it can also govern the premise of this is how you conduct yourself, whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks leading up to the election. And then at the end of it, and back to his point of dealing with petitions, that you can actually have those petitions addressed. Really, I mean, it's a difficult matter that I guess from a law perspective, I'm not really versed in terms of that criminal legislative law, but that it takes that long. But all in all, if you ask me, I think we have 4 or 5 years left that we should be able to move to the point of saying, let us do electronic voting at this point in time. And I mean, that's the direction that we need to go right now in terms of actually. What we wanted to make was that even the media themselves, we as reporters, and even the broadest perspective of the media, we should be able to give each and every candidate equal airtime. We shouldn't be moving to the court to say Jeremy needs to give Alicia more time. He's giving because Bart is a man, and he's giving him more time than giving Alicia less, and Alicia has to move to the court, because she thinks there's some favoritism or sexism going on there. So this is 2020. I mean, let us have a debate, an argument between both parties, the leaders, the constituency representatives, and so forth. And you give everybody free time.
while I agree that we can do electronic voting, there are countries that are right here in the region, bigger than us, bigger population, bigger voting population, that don't have electronic voting. And you know by 10 o'clock Eastern Caribbean time, when they're electioned, by then, who wins the election. Even if it's an exit poll, by that time you know, okay, all right, you may not have finished counting, but you have an idea of which of the parties would have won the elections. And they don't have electronic voting. So I think that we just need to make the necessary adjustments. I remember speaking to the supervisor of elections, and he did point out that there are certain things that would probably need to be adjusted legally to make it possible for the count to go a lot faster. All right, we're almost out of time. We just have about 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is just to give each of us an opportunity to talk about what we're anticipating and looking forward for 2021 on the various topics that we'd have spoken. COVID-19 for sure is certainly one of those areas that we're going to be keeping our eyes on for 2021 and what we're hoping or think may happen going forward. So Alicia, we'll start with you just to give us your take on that for the last few minutes.
Well, I would see that in St. Kitts and Nevis, I wish that we would continue with the being more hygiene, but I also see the fact that more attention was given to mental health, and I think that is something that is key going forward.
So Jeremy, then we'll just turn over you too quickly to give us your 2 cents.
Well, again, I'm expecting for us to get this 19 pandemic under control at some point across the world, because as you know, we all are tired of seeing it. So people want to go places, do things, get back to some level of normalcy. That's for sure. For us also to get the vaccine and begin inoculating people here in St. Kitts and Nevis, to the point that we can see some of the strict measures that we're under right now would some of it would be relaxed, and for us to get back to some level of normalcy. In terms of the education sector, I want to see for us to get back to that point where we are actually saying, look, school is back to normal, we are removing the shift system, all of that. Also, I want to see us get to the point where crime remains on the trend, on the downward trajectory for 2021. Give kudos to the police. They've been doing their bits and pieces to control crime, criminal activities in St. Kitts and Nevis. And all in all, just to see us here in St. Kitts and Nevis get to that point where we were prior to COVID-19. We may not get back to that fully 100%, but if we can get there at least 60%, that would highlight we're going in the direction at this point in time.
All right, thank you. Over to Mr. Bart.
Well, I think for 2021, the major challenge is for the country to recover economically, because that will drive everything else. Tourism, we are so dependent on tourism now. It's interesting that we came out of a monocultural agricultural situation and we jumped into another one in the sense of a heavy reliance on tourism. And it has really affected us, and it has shown that we really need to have a diversified economy. I understand that the government is going to be trying to create greater emphasis on agriculture, and we hope that is successful, because I think it's important. I've always maintained that a strong agriculture sector is vital to any nation that wants to build an economy and sustain itself. But tourism is going to be a long, hard road of recovery. It is not going to be a quick fix. We see what is happening in our main market or source markets in the United States of America, in Canada, and in the United Kingdom. The pandemic does not seem to be going to be under any kind of great control in the foreseeable, well, in the near future. So that creates a challenge for us. Where do we get our economic input? So I think that I think that what will happen is that the government is going to have to try and create greater emphasis on capital projects to create employment, and we need to have that happening very quickly. And it is my hope that in 2021 we'll really make some headway in economic recovery, because we know that a lot of people are hurting in the environment that we are in right now. And so we are looking to get that recovery going, and we're hoping that it's sustainable, so that we can fall our way out of the situation while the rest of the world is also doing the same.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank Mr. Glenn Bart from SK Newsline, from our newsroom here at SK Newsline, and Mr. Jermaine Abel from SKN Vibes. Unfortunately, it seemed like technology got the better of us in the case of Mrs. Danielle Blake. Somehow we lost connection with her, but we want to thank her as well for being part of this special program. It's 2020 in retrospect here on SK Newsline and Voice of the Caribbean Radio. Again, we thank all our panelists, and we wish each and every one of you watching and listening a prosperous and productive 2021. I'm Andre Huey. I was your host. Thank you for watching and listening, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Taste the flavor of succulent barbecue chicken, pork, and ribs. It's Nightlife Barbecue and Grill across the road from Caribbean Cinema in Buckley's. You're sure to taste the best food you ever had. Try their roast breadfruit hot off the grill, or swing by during lunchtime for their lunch menu. Oxtail, mutton, stew pork, stew chicken, and more. The nightly session cuisine is the best. Open every day for breakfast and lunch. So when you're hungry and you need somewhere to get some great food, your choice has got to be Nightlife, located across the road from Caribbean Cinemas. Call 664-7439, 667-1596, or 664-5103. Nightlife Barbecue and Grill.
When it comes to prescription and all your healthcare needs, that is the new Paris Pharmacy, located on Westbourne Gut Bar Stair near Skilek, offering the following services: a full and computerized prescription filling service, drug interaction monitoring, extended opening hours, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. during weekdays, open 6 hours on Sundays, holidays, and available for emergencies, a wide range of medicines at reasonable prices and top quality. We are not the largest, but try the hardest to please you. Paris Pharmacy, always there, taking care. Reach us on Facebook, WhatsApp, or call direct 465-8569, 762-7919, and 763-9142. Paris Pharmacy, that's all that matters.
It's the new and improved SK Newsline Android mobile app. With the SK Newsline app, you can watch your news reports, the SK Newsline newscast, sports, special features, and so much more. You can also send us a WhatsApp or call us directly. Go in the Google Play Store, search SK Newsline, and download the app today. The SK Newsline mobile app. News on the go. For the finest in pastries and baked products, your only choice has to be Bryden's Bakery, located on Main Street, New Road, St. Peters. They offer the best in breads, cakes, cheesecakes, cupcakes, cookies, and much more. Visit their cafe and savor breakfast sandwiches, coffee, espresso, and ice cream. Bryden's Bakery also specializes in a variety of healthy breads, cakes, cookies, pies, and pastries for all your special events. Call 667-1505. Opening hours 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays for Ice Cream Sundays. Extended opening hours during the Christmas season. Bryden's Bakery, simply the best. It's the new and improved SK Newsline Android mobile app. With the SK Newsline app, you can watch your news reports, the SK Newsline newscast, sports, special features, and so much more. You can also send us a WhatsApp or call us directly. Go in the Google Play Store, search SK Newsline, and download the app today. The SK Newsline mobile app. News on the go.